Hi everyone, welcome back to This Book Belongs to Pam. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a tier ranking of all of the books I read last year in 2021. I'm partially doing this video because I took a break in the second half of last year and I really wasn't able to share any of the books that I've read. I wasn't able to, give my thoughts on any of the books, and I wanted to share them with you just in case you were looking for some recommendations, or I don't know if you want to know my thoughts. Does anybody want to know my thoughts? So I thought doing a tier ranking is like a quick fire way of just going through all of the 41 books I read.
And the one book that I DNFed in 2021?
This is just gonna be a fun little video. These are just my opinions on the books that I read in 2021. If you love the book that I hate, that's just the difference between what we like. So yeah. So let's talk about the tiers that I have. First, I have my straight to my bookshelf tier, and if you're familiar with me, if you haven't watched any of my videos, I read all of my books on my Kindle, which means that I don't usually have the physical copy of the book, and I actually prefer it that way. I borrow the books from the library, and then if I love the book, I loved it enough that I want to reread it or want to have a copy of it, then that's when I go ahead and buy hardcover. There are a couple of exceptions to this, one being sequels to like first books that I really love. If I love the first book, I kind of just want to get the whole thing, I think, most of the time. So straight to my bookshelf is kind of like the best books that I just want to dive right back into again. Yeah, so my next tier is Gave Me the Feels. These are books that just, gave me a lot of thoughts to think about, a lot of things to consider, to just make me feel so much, whether that's, sad, heartbroken, happy, joy, the entire spectrum of feels. So my third tier is It Was a Fun Ride. So these are the books that I just had a lot of fun reading. I probably won't read these books ever again. I probably rated this book like 3 stars, but I just had fun reading it. It was enjoyable. Some aspects of it I really love, some of it probably I don't. It was just, a fun ride. The fourth tier is Could Have Been Better. These are books that I think if like one aspect of this is improved or changed, I would have loved this book so much more. The last tier is not for me. These are just books that I just didn't vibe with. I probably won't recommend them. I'm glad I read them in the sense that I'm no longer curious about them. But yeah, these are books that are just not my style. With that said, let's just dive into ranking all of the 41 books that I read in 2021. Okay, let's go right into it. I'm not gonna do this in a chronological order. I'm just gonna go through the books that I have down in this list. Okay, so the first one on the list is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. This is the first book in a duology, and I read it after reading Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone. And this one, I actually think this could have been better, maybe. Let's see, what did I rate it? So I actually have a rating in my Notion. I have all of the books I read as well as a numerical rating using Book Rose's Copile method. I'm gonna link her video explaining that. I use that to determine the number of stars, just so I can have something like objective. Not really that objective, but something numerical, I guess. So for King of Scars, I rated this 3 stars, so that sounds about right, like a low 3 stars. So this one, because I already have a relationship with all of the characters, I think all, or like most of the characters in this book from the other duology and trilogy in the same Grisha verse, I have that kind of investment, so I like the characters in that sense. But this book just felt like it was just mushed together, and the plot didn't feel as strong to me as it did in Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. I wish it could have been better because I love the characters, but yeah, King of Scars could have been better for me. Next, I'm actually gonna go here first because this is the first book in a series, and that is Darker Shade of Magic. It goes straight into my bookshelf because I already have it in my cart. I'm just waiting for some kind of discount or sale. But I really love this book. I think, yeah, it's part of a reading wrap up that I did, so I'm gonna link that in the description. This book, oh, I just really love it. I think I'm at the point where I'm just catching up with all of the YA fantasy books that came out in the last 5 years or so, because I haven't read this like voraciously in the last decade. I've only started reading last year, so I really have a lot to catch up on, and this is one of those books. I love the world building. I think it was just enough world building to get you immersed into the books, but not too much that you feel like muddled by all of the things that are going on. I know that I'm gonna reread this book. I know that I want to just go back into the world that V. Schwab has created. I think this is also my first V. Schwab book, which is amazing. So yeah, this is straight to my bookshelf for me. Okay, the next one is A Gathering of Shadows. You know it, straight to my bookshelf. This is actually my favorite book of the trilogy, because this one has the elements of like a tournament. So there's kind of like, you get to see more of the magic in the world, how it's utilized in many different ways. I love that about Gathering of Shadows. And I'm just gonna go ahead and find the third book. Here we go, Conjuring of Light. So it's definitely gonna go straight to my bookshelf. This is not my favorite out of the three. I think if I had to order them, it's gonna be the second book, then the first book, and then this third book. So next we have Shadow and Bone. I think Shadow and Bone could have been better. It actually, no, let's put it in, it was a fun ride. It was a fun ride in a sense that context. I read Six of Crows before I read Shadow and Bone. So I was already expecting so much because I really love the writing and the everything in Six of Crows. But Shadow and Bone, you can feel that it was an earlier work by Lee Bardugo. It's very typical. It's very, the chosen one trope, and it was okay. It was a fun ride in the sense that you get to know more of the Grishaverse, because you're not really super introduced to it in Six of Crows. You're just kind of plopped into it. But, in Shadow and Bone, you get to know more about all of the different sort of orders, if you will. But it was just okay for me. Next is, I'm gonna pick the first books first. We have Six of Crows. This is straight in my bookshelf. I already own this book. And this was the book that kickstarted the whole YA fantasy craze for me last year. So obviously, Crooked Kingdom goes straight to my bookshelf. I already have it in my bookshelf. This one is just, it's A+. I'm glad that I read this duology first, because I think if I read Shadow and Bone trilogy first, I might not have continued. Yeah, so I'm glad that I read this first. Next is Janice Silang at Ang Terak ng Tabon. This is a Filipino authored book, and it's also written in Filipino, which is one of my goals for this year, 2022. This one, I think it could have been better. I like the premise of it. This is about a boy who loves playing this game called Tala Online. It's an MMO RPG game. But suddenly, something weird happens, in the sense that all of the people who play this game, at some point, they die while playing the game, except for him. So now, he's somehow forced to sort of figure out his role in all of these things. What's different about him? Why isn't he the only one surviving this mysterious sort of deaths? And yeah, you just get to know a lot about Filipino folklore and myths. The thing that I didn't like about this is the massive amounts of info dumping. There were just pages upon pages upon pages of like a history lesson of Filipino myths and folklores, which in a way I appreciate, because I personally do not know a lot about Filipino folklore and myths. I know some here and there, but I'm not, that knowledgeable about it. So I definitely needed that sort of background information or context. But I just wish that it was done a little bit more subtle. I just wish that it was weaved more into the story, rather than just one person sitting down talking to our main character, Janus, and then he's just telling him everything. It's like a teacher doing like a history lesson in like Filipino folklore. So I just wish that part was done better. I have all the other books in the series. There are 3 more books, I believe, and I'm excited to read them this year. Hopefully, they fare better in that sense. Since we already have a lot of this background info from the first book, I hope that the second to the fourth book has a lot more sort of movement to it, a lot more showing rather than telling. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Okay, the next book is Memory Police. This one, I think it could have been better. This one, I gave this Memory Police. I gave this 3 stars. I loved the premise of it, where you're in this dystopian world where suddenly things just start missing, and then you're forced to forget that thing. So, for example, one day coffee is just declared as non-existent. Anything about coffee, books, any literature, art, if you will, products that has coffee in it or pertains to coffee are just erased, wiped out from the world. It was so slow and dragging. It definitely made me think about a lot of things, about what is most important to us, about the things that we hold dear to us, and what it means to be you, to have yourself, to be sure of your memories and the things that you thought were important to you. So I think in that sense it was very interesting. Would I read it again? I'm not sure. I might be interested in it again and try to reread it and see if there's new things I could sort of learn from it. But as of now, I wish it could have been better. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, next is Atomic Habits. This one, it was a fun ride for me. This is actually the first book that I read in all of 2021. And I was in the States during this time. I was in California. Then I went to Barnes and Noble. And I just picked up this book very spontaneously because it's a new year. And I wanted to just, see if I could glean something from this book that's going to help me, build habits. And it actually did help me. I built a pretty good morning routine at the start of 2021. The only reason why I broke that routine was then I flew back to the Philippines, so I was messed up from the time zone. Yeah, overall I think it was a fun ride. This book might help you, this book might not. It might be generic to you, but I think it helped me, so it was fine with me. Next is Vicious. This is one of the last books that I read in 2021, and this goes straight to my bookshelf. V.E. Schwab, just going straight to my bookshelf. I don't think I've read a book like this. It's kind of like, you kind of have like these 2 villains just, fighting each other and sort of trying to prove who's the more evil person. And I really love that. And it's also fun that it's set in like modern day world. It's not like this fantasy world, but just, the world that you and I know. I haven't read the second book, which is Vengeful. I have it because I got the duology for Christmas. So I'm probably going to do a reading vlog on that. Next is we have Siege and Storm, the second book. Oops, sorry, I keep moving the thing. Siege and Storm, the second book, and the Shadow and Bone trilogy. And this book I did not like. This book was so slow for me. It was boring. The only thing that kept me going was that I wanted to know what happened next because I was already invested in the world. This was just a slog for me to get through. I really did not like it at all. Next one is Ruin and Rising. This one is a little bit better. It was actually quite fun in a sense that you get to know more about how the magic system works because it's used in a lot more unique ways in this book. The next book that I read is Sorcery of Thorns. This is just straight to my bookshelf. I love this book. I loved all of the library imagery. I love the characters. I love the banter in it. This was just an overall fun book that I know I would want to read again. I don't think it's groundbreaking or anything, but this just feels very cozy. Next is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This one is I'm kind of undecided. I think it could have been better. I think it would do better as a short story, like a really short story rather than a book, because I think the everything could have been a lot more tighter and a lot more sort of compact, because it kind of got draggy and it felt like some parts were just there to lengthen the book, if you will. But yeah, I think it could have been better. I know that's not like a popular opinion, so. Humble Pie. This one is a nonfiction book. It was a fun read. It's basically just a very nerdy book because I am a math major. I graduated with a degree in applied mathematics. So this was interesting in a sense that you get to see how math is just everywhere. In everything that we do, there's math in it. And that's not obvious, but it becomes very evident once something goes wrong in the math. Next is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This one, I'm torn. Do I want this in my bookshelf? I really love this book. I gave this for sure 5 stars, even without looking at my sort of list here. Yeah, I see it now. It's 5 stars. But I don't think I want to read this again, mostly because it's very heavy. It's very beautifully written. Chanel Miller did a great job in writing this memoir. It's not just her recounting the things that happened to her, but more of making a commentary as a whole on women and, you know, the woman experience. I'm not sure. Maybe if you ask me again in a couple of months, I would want to get a physical copy of it. But for now, I'm just gonna put it in Gave Me the Feel. Next is Human Acts. This is another one where it's just so heartbreaking. Do I want a copy of it in my shelves? This one just I cried when I read this book. I think I talked about this in a wrap-up video, so I'm gonna link that. Okay, I'm gonna put it in Gave Me the Feels. I think I gave this 5 stars as well, but again, I'm not sure if I want to read this book again. Maybe, but it's just too heartbreaking. Maybe. I'm not sure. Tana French, In the Woods. This one, it was a fun ride. This one is my first Tana French book, and I enjoyed it. It was a bit meandering at times. It was a bit repetitive at times, but it was a fun enough ride for me to want to read another Tana French book again. Untamed. This one is not for me. This is marketed as a memoir of Glennon Doyle, but it read to me like a super self-helpy book. Which I guess when it's a memoir, usually it's some kind of self-help. But the first half of the book, I really like the first half of the book because it was very much about her story, about her struggles as a mother, as someone who has, I think she was an alcoholic at some point. But then the last half of the book was just super self-helpy. And the way that it's written like this short stories, like snippets of her life. And then she has lesson from that snippet of her life. Maybe this was a book that she needed to write, but it was not for me. It was not for me. I almost returned it and not read it. Yeah. I didn't like it at all. Next is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This one is just a fun ride. You have to sort of really suspend your disbelief on this one because there's just a lot of things that happen here that probably wouldn't, happen in real life. Especially given the fact that we have high school students as our characters here. But yeah, it was just fun. It was I think this reminds me of like a Scooby-Doo episode. It's that kind of sort of mystery thriller for me. So next is Please Look After Mom. I read this as part of a readathon, Army-a-thon last May. And this one is, this one gave me all the feels. This was heartbreaking and sad. I read a lot of sad books. I'm just noticing now. Mostly because you sort of start to think about your own relationships with your parents, with your mother most especially. It's not really about the plot of like looking after mom, but it's more of like discovering the different characters and seeing yourself in them one way or another. Next book that I read is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This book, I did not expect to like this book, but I actually did. I think I gave this 4 stars. This one is It's like a family drama thriller thing. What I really loved about this book is showing how people can be well intentioned but at the same time very ignorant. Because the family in here, the picture perfect family, they're not bad people. They're well intentioned people, but they're kind of oblivious to their privilege, to their luxuries, to things that cannot be afforded to other people because of their backgrounds. It was it was a fun ride for me. Next one is The Best We Could Do. This one gave me the feels. This is a graphic novel memoir. It's really hard to sort of rate a memoir because this is obviously something very personal to the authors. But this one was just heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. Next is All the Light We Cannot See. This one gave me the feels. Yeah, I talked about this book in my wrap-up video as well. And yeah, this one just gave me feels because although this book was a little bit hard to read because it was kind of slow and kind of confusing since you jump back and forth in different perspectives and timelines, it was very interesting and it definitely, made you think a lot about how wars just affect people on both sides in so many different ways. Next is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I also read this as part of the readathon, and this one is just, it was a fun ride. I enjoyed it so much. I think this is the first book that I read that had fae folk, like fairies in it, and all of this, imagery of the autumn courts, and was there a winter court? Yeah. Oh, spring court? Oh, anyway, all of the courts, all of the imagery in this was fun. It was just a super wild journey, and the romance is kind of cute. So it was a fun ride. It was a fun ride. Next is The Inheritance Game. This one was also a fun ride. I had a lot of fun because of all of the puzzles and all of the riddles that are in the book. There's a bit of romance, a lot of adventure, and I breezed through this book because it was so enjoyable. Next we have Mistborn. Where do I start with Final Empire? I was so intimidated by this book because I don't have a lot of experience reading like adult fantasy, and I was scared that I would have a hard time following because also this book is part of this whole universe I'm not like super familiar with. There's this like Cosmere universe, there's this Stormlight archive. Like I'm not familiar with it at all. Like I'm still a little bit lost, but I just know that this is book one of the Mistborn trilogy, and I read it and oh my gosh, I think I finished it in a day or two. I loved it so much, so much. The magic system in this world is so unique. I have never read a magic system like that. It's not like elemental, which is the typical magic system, and it's just super interesting. The characters are so different, and I love that romance isn't really the like a major factor in the book as well. It's really about adventure and sort of saving this world that they're in, sort of. And the writing is also super interesting. There's a lot of Easter eggs here and there, and then you get to the end and you're like, oh, so that's what it was about. I really loved it. I already bought the second book, Well of Ascension, and like a physical copy of the book, and I'm super excited to read that. I'm definitely gonna be doing a reading vlog on it because I just loved it. The ending of this book sort of killed me a little bit. I'm a little bit scared for the rest of the book because of how the first one ended, but I am also super excited to just dive right into this universe that Brandon Sanderson has created. Next book is Almond. This one I also read as part of the readathon. It was, I think I'm gonna rate this as, let me think. I gave this a 3 stars. I think it could have been better. Yeah, I'm gonna give it could have been better. Anyway, this Ride the Lights. This one, the setting is really good. Like the setting is very rich. I can like see Like, I can see the setting with my mind when I read it from the book, but the characters, the plot are kind of eh. There's a lot of repetition in it. There's a lot of like super flowery words, super tiring to read. Gave up on this book. This almost became a DNF, but I just pushed through, and I'm actually glad I did because the ending was interesting and it made me want to read the next book. Although I'm not super excited about it, but I think this first book is just, it's not for me. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put it could have been better because I did really like the setting and the ending was kind of good to me. It was interesting. Okay, next is Clara and the Sun. I think could have been better. I think I gave this a 3 stars. Yes, it's 3 stars. That's very low. And the reason for it is just I'm kind of confused. Because you have, in this book, you have android called AFs or artificial friends. Your perspective is this one android named Clara, and you just, in her head all of the time. But then I'm just kind of confused because of how androids are described. So you have this Clara who's a very observant android. That's kind of like her special quirk. But then for some reason, she knows some objects and not others. She knows what a cup is, but she doesn't know what a bookshelf is. Like, she described a cup like as a cup, but then she describes a bookshelf as this rectangular wooden object that serves as a container for this books. Kind of like that. You know what I mean? So I'm just kind of confused. Why does she know some things and not other things? And that just takes me away from the book whenever I read it. That just bothered me a lot when I was reading it. I do think that there's a lot of interesting nuggets of information here. They talk a lot about what makes a person a person. Is it your memories? Is it how you look and how you talk? Is it your mannerisms? Those kinds of things, which I think is quite interesting, but I think it could have been better if it were more consistent on the world that it built. Next is Arsenic and Adobo. Arsenic and Adobo. It was a fun ride. It's a cozy read. Next is Pride and Premeditation. This one, it was a fun ride as well. This is kind of like a Pride and Prejudice, but make it mystery. Next is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I guess gave me the feels. Made me think a lot about ethics, about morality, about how far should society go in order to achieve certain things. I actually want to watch the movie because I know that this one has like a blockbuster, like super intense cast movie, so I'm excited to watch that as well. Maybe I'll do a video on it, maybe. Next is This Is How You Lose a Time War. This one gave me the feels. Next is Hawthorne Legacy. This one could have been better. I'm kind of disappointed by this because I really enjoyed Inheritance Games. I did a reading vlog on it, so I'm gonna post that link. Next is Ace of Spades. I enjoyed the book, the premise of it. The plot was interesting. The characters were kind of interesting, but very one-dimensional, I think. Next is The House on the Cerulean Sea, and this one is just, this was just wholesome. Coraline. This one, I also read this as part of a readathon. I want to have a copy of it because it's creepy, it's intriguing, it kind of has a lot of lessons in there. Anya's Ghost. This is the last book that I read. This is a graphic novel. And this one was just fun. It was about this girl who discovers a ghost in a well, and she takes the ghost with her accidentally, and the ghost just helps her become this beautiful woman that everybody loves in school. She's like an immigrant, so she feels out of place all the time, but this ghost helps her become, the popular kid. But then she realized that the ghost is kind of weird. There's something off about the ghost. And then she finds out, and just things just spiral from there. Life as We Knew It. This one is not for me. This one is a like end of the world book where the moon was hit by this meteor and the moon was pushed closer to the earth, which meant a lot of things in terms of like how it affects gravity and whatnot. It's like science fiction, but the weird thing about this is I feel like nothing was like researched well. We made it. Those are all of the 41 books I read in 2021. So the book that I DNF'd, I did not include it in here, it does not deserve to be in here, was If I Disappear. The premise was so interesting. It was about this girl. Bad things happen to her life and she's very kind of like a hermit, and then she listens to this true crime podcast. And suddenly the host in the podcast just disappears, and she took it upon herself to figure out what happened to this girl. It could have been really good, but the writing is just, I cannot read. I cannot. We're just too much in the head of the main girl that I already forgot the name of, and she pontificates about every single thing. I tried so hard to finish it, but I just couldn't, so I just put my big girl like pants on and I just DNFed it. The only book that I DNFed in 2021. This is it. This is my tier ranking of all the books that I read in 2021. I feel quite good that I read a lot of books that I would want to buy for my bookshelf. The ones in the gave me the feels category, at some point I will probably want a copy of them, but they're just not a priority for me right now. But I love that I got back into reading last year, and I'm quite proud that I read 41 books, even though I didn't meet my 50 book goal. What were your favorite books of 2021? Let me know in the comments. I would be super interested to find out more and to add more to my TBR. I'm gonna try and post more on my book channel, so I will hopefully see you in the next video. Bye! Thanks for watching!